Hello everybody, so my name's Alex Fleetwood. I'm the head of studio for Niantic's new London Games team, and I have to start with, I'm afraid, a tiny caveat. We're not sure exactly who wrote the title for this talk. It kind of looks like an AI wrote it, but if I could answer all of those questions, then we'd all be in a very different world. But we'll be answering them as best we can, but we'll be sharing some useful insights from our first kind of 9 months under the Niantic banner here in London, and some design principles about how we think we can approach making innovative and commercial new AR games. So first, let me just quickly tell you a little bit about Niantic and about me, and then we'll get into that. So Niantic's mission is based on this idea that technology can deepen our connection with the world and the people around us. It's built this unique technology stack with this mission of encouraging exploring the world around us. There are just so many amazing places and stories and adventures out there. Exercise, sometimes a walk will do, and a nudge to get out there and walk has an amazing beneficial effect. And then engaging in real-world social events with friends, making new friends. It's so tightly keyed in to our well-being to be doing these things, to be discovering, to be walking, to be socializing. And Niantic has really, through its game portfolio, Ingress, Pokemon Go, and Harry Potter Wizards Unite, has delivered in an incredible way on the 3 planks of this mission. These data points that are on screen right now are a huge part of the reason why I was so excited to come and work at Niantic. The scale of the accomplishment in terms of these beneficial impacts is really incredible. But there's a lot more going on at Niantic than game development. Underpinning all of the games that I mentioned is a powerful technology platform, the Niantic Real World platform, which is actually something that Niantic has been investing in and evolving since the beginning of the organization. So here's a quick primer on the platform for those of you who aren't fully versed in it yet. Working from left to right, you have the gameplay technology. That's the part of the system that does the heavy lifting so that world-scale games can happen inside of a single game instance. This system also supports social features, mapping, a whole bunch of other essential components that are necessary to develop and publish a real-world AR game. And these have all been derived from and road-tested through the experience of shipping Ingress, Pokemon Go, and Wizards Unite. It also, and this is really important to know, it handles all of the AR interactions that you experience in the course of a Niantic game. Very excitingly, as you may have read on the Niantic blog, Niantic is in the initial stages of making this platform available worldwide to third parties. Initially, that's happening through things like the Developers Contest and the Creators Program. And we at Niantic London are also a part of this mission. So Niantic London is a first-party games studio. So we are formally a part of the Niantic organization. We all work inside of Niantic, but we are external in some ways. And Niantic London was formed through the acquisition of my company, Sensible Object. So Sensible Object was a venture-funded game startup that built inclusive social games augmented by software. So we built tabletop games with an augmented reality layer, designed to be played face-to-face, not face-to-screen. And our flagship title was on the screen here. It was this AR stacking game called Beasts of Balance. Did pretty well, raised a bunch of money on Kickstarter, won a lot of awards, was retailed through all sorts of partners, including the Apple Store. We also started experimenting with voice. We were part of the first ever Alexa Accelerator in Seattle and developed a range of smart speaker augmented board games. But going back further than that, before Sensible Object, I founded a studio called Hide and Seek. This was dedicated to inventing new kinds of play, and back in 2006, which seems an extremely long time ago now, we created the first pervasive gaming, which is what the kind of nerdy academic term for kind of locative AR gaming was back then. First pervasive gaming festival in the UK. That business, that company was more of an agency. We worked with clients like Sony, PlayStation, Tate Modern, as well as doing our own events, festivals, and other things. So this photo on the screen is actually like literally the first moment of the first game that we ran at Hide and Seek. So this is May 2006, and this was a game called Journey to the End of the Night, which is a street game by a player group in San Francisco called SF0. I played it in New York. We brought it over and ran it here. And I love this photo because it really was the beginning of everything. The looks on these guys' faces and the kind of intensity of running this crazy race game across the whole of London, starting in Wapping and finishing on the beach by the South Bank Centre, really kicked the rest of it all off. So now my job and what we're doing is to bring all of that shared experience, kind of 10 years of making experimental physical digital hybrid games into this new context of being a first-party studio inside of Niantic. So there are 2 more studios like this. There's one in LA and there's one in Tokyo. And our objectives are to firstly innovate on the Niantic experiential model, trying to come up with new ways for Niantic to fulfill its mission of explore, exercise, and real-world social. The second is to be one of the first teams to work with the Niantic real-world platform, trying to get our hands on it early, use the full functionality of the tools to create new games. And as we do that, hopefully pave the way for it to be easier for other teams to come after us by providing useful feedback and input to the platform teams for further development. And then the third is research, and that's to collaborate with AR research and platform teams that Niantic has created to understand the affordances of new features in augmented reality as and when they become available. We're very lucky in that the AR research team is actually co-located in our London studio. It was formed through the acquisition of a spin-out from UCL called Matrix Mill. So that's the mission, that's the objectives, that's what we're doing. How are we doing it? And in order to kind of get into this, which is the kind of meat of my talk, I wanted to share this quote from a great book, which I recommend to all game makers and game studios, called Hitmakers by Derek Thompson. While we can be successful in many ways, obviously we are in a hits business in the games industry. We always will be. And that means that we're wrestling with this challenge of making games that accomplish those objectives that I shared of mission, platform, and research, whilst also making our best shot at games which can perform strongly in terms of player satisfaction and commercial revenues. Now, of course, this is the hard problem facing any commercial game team. But what is typical is normally to control the outcomes of commercial gaming innovation. Many game companies' innovation processes lock down an awful lot of the variables in terms of what you can change. So the core IP, the meta, the underlying tech stack, the monetization design, all of those might remain completely unchanging from game to game, whilst you're changing some other things in the core gameplay loops or other aspects of the experience to see whether it generates something novel, engaging and commercial. And that's not the Niantic way. I think even if, culturally the company wanted to operate in that way, it's not like AR games companies have the option. The knowledge base that we have to draw on as an AR games team is substantially smaller because the number of highly successful augmented reality games not made by Niantic is not huge. So that's our challenge. And at this point, much as I'd love to share details about what we're working on, I'm afraid that piece will have to wait for a Pocket Gamer Connect in years to come. So instead, I wanted to share some aspects of the process that we're trying to bring as a games team that's informing our thinking and that might help us together as a community come up with some fresh ways forward. And these really come, from 10 years of experimental game design and commercial innovation in this space. So the first is to think about how diversity functions inside of a creative AR games team. We do a lot of thinking about diversity as a leadership group, and as a company, Niantic is incredibly committed to this. You're seeing pictures of teams from across the world. And we're thinking about diversity and inclusion on many different axes. There are the more obvious ones like gender, nationality, ethnicity, but obviously disciplinary diversity is also really crucial to us. Narrative, game design, engineering, but also product design, hardware, mixed reality. reality UX, new disciplines that don't necessarily have names yet. You have to kind of allow all of those into your process. And something that's very important to our creative process right now is the diversity in game preference. It's a really small point, but I think it often gets missed. Everyone on your team really loves playing a different kind of game. Everyone's game tastes are pretty unique. And I think it's an important kind of diversity to make sure you surface and allow the opinions of what makes a game tick flourish, so that you can understand the motivations and mindsets of many different kinds of player, starting with your own core group. Something that I've gradually learned, and it's been a slow process, as a creative leader of diverse teams, is how and when to get out of the way. It's really impossible let's say you've been lucky, as we have, to kind of compile a team which has this kind of diversity baked into it. It's going to be impossible for each individual inside of that team to operate at the best of their ability if you don't intentionally create a lot of space for that to happen. As a creative leader with a set of tendencies to get excited about ideas, especially my own, it's a big project to dial that back and make space for the creativity and input of others. And I think this is especially important for games that take place in the real world, which adds a whole different set of opportunities but also complexities that entails. So the link that's on the screen, which I encourage you to Google, .everyone consequence scanning, is for a process which is an agile event for responsible innovators. .everyone is a UK non-profit. It's dedicated to making the world a better place for digital culture and for digital teams. And we helped to beta test this in its early stages, and we've integrated it into our rituals and processes. The event is designed to be run multiple times through your product development cycle, and you answer 3 questions. What are the intended and unintended consequences of the feature that you're proposing to introduce into your game? What are the positive aspects of those consequences that we want to focus on? And what are the not so positive aspects that we want to mitigate? So when .everyone were putting this together, they were thinking about, well, if perhaps the product teams inside of Facebook had had some more attention to some of the unintended consequences of the innovations they're making, maybe we wouldn't quite be in the kind of political situation that we're in right now. And certainly when we're making games which take place in the real world, we believe that we need to be incredibly thoughtful about this, especially with that lens of diverse teams. One man's really fun running around a park experience is a woman's safety risk. And so introducing those voices and making sure you really listen to them is crucial. While implementing this process, like any new process, wasn't completely straightforward, members of my team have reported that they found it to be super constructive. It helps us get away from a kind of move fast and break things mindset, and instead you surface concerns early enough that you really can amplify the good things about the new ideas that you're having, so that they can become real chance of it being really successful features in a future game. So the second idea that I wanted to share with you is this idea of lily pads. So these games that we're working on and we're thinking about right now, we're trying to ensure that they have a super solid set of lily pads. And that means that as we target ambitious objectives, a game compiled of interlocking systems that involve location, new types of movement, AR, novel core game loops, great narrative, heads-up user experience, smart thinking about player retention and monetization, multiplayer features, event design, and many more, a well-balanced economy, a coherent world, seasonal content, good reasons to go walking every day. We can break those down to a coherent set of interlocking prototypes that we can build in order, proving the right things at the right time, hopping from lily pad to lily pad until we reach our goal. Now, of course, prototyping forms a kind of core component of any good game-making process, so there's nothing especially novel about that. But what this does manifest as in practice when you're making AR games with perhaps many more variables that you have to handle at once, is a particular version of that that involves us being ruthless with ourselves about the most essential questions that we need to solve at any point. There are usually, in my experience, no matter how complex the game you're trying to make, a handful of truly existential questions that you need to answer to be sure that this game can have the opportunity to be successful. So what we're trying to do is, rather than be ambitious about the feature set of the game that we want to make and then proceeding along all of those features in parallel, we're instead trying to find the quickest, simplest, dirtiest way of answering those existential questions as early as possible. And most of the work that we're doing at this stage looks unrecognizable in the finished product. But one quality that these lily pads all share is that they're fun. They're games. Whatever a lily pad is, it has to be a game in its own right that you want to play over and over again. Now, why is that important? Well, again, these are lessons from being in this space for a long time. We wouldn't have been successful if every version of our games hadn't been playable. Always having something to show helps you build momentum, both internally and with decision makers. It also means that you can center the instincts of your team and trust your experience and intuition as game designers. Again, relating back to that point about diversity, you finish something and you ensure that the whole team is with you as you leave that lily pad and you move on to the next one. And the final statement here of Chainable is about long-term planning. Some of these objectives that we have involve huge levels of ambition, and that's great, but you've got to get there somehow. So having a good sense of whether you can chain these things together and have a good sense of what you will prove in what order is a really good indicator of your ability to get to where you're going. One idea where this did, I think, work extremely well was in Beasts of Balance. I don't have time to elaborate on all these stages, but the initial vision for Beasts of Balance was a computer vision augmented reality stacking game with infinite digital and physical upgrades. It's Jenga meets Skylanders. And we started out, the first lily pad was a couple of months of stacking like random household objects on top of each other and playing make-believe games with them to imagine what they're doing. Centering the fun instinct in the development process of Beasts of Balance meant that when we came to choose the technology, we chose the simplest sensor to sense the tower on the market, the humble load cell, the kind of thing you find in your digital kitchen scales. It's exciting then to relate this idea of lily pads to Niantic, which isn't just thinking far ahead, but is also uniquely equipped to support teams like mine. As well as the platform, we're getting this and this research, it's also shipping lily pads. Projects like Codename Neon, which showcases multiplayer AR, Yeti, which we'll take a look at in a second, and Wayfarer, which is putting location editing in the hands of our most engaged players. Niantic ships these research projects that look like games and feel like games and inspire us in the way that games do. And that means that, for the first time for me, I can think a couple of lily pads further ahead than in our days as a scrappy startup, preparing for incoming changes to consumer hardware and being thoughtful about what the AR consumer landscape is going to look like a couple of years from now. To share one example, this is Niantic's demo to show off a research feature which is not yet implemented, which is occlusion. Occlusion, as I'm sure you all know, is one of the kind of holy grails of AR, things passing behind and in front of one another. And I love this video. It's just not just a tech demo, right? Like, there is so much character and thought and fun. The fact that it's there's a Niantic dressed like the Yeti kind of walking around with it. It's just these things, they speak to the kind of passion and doggedness of the organization. And that's the kind of final point with my 0 seconds that I have left that I want to wrap up with. I think what lies behind these kind of design principles and thoughts that I've shared today is this culture of dogged perseverance. The willingness to learn whatever lessons you can from each failure and to put yourself in with a shot at success. I think this was a quality in the companies that I founded, and I'm very pleased and proud that Niantic places such a high value on it. So here's to all of the games companies striving to do something new. Thank you.
That was brilliant. I wish we could have you on for the whole afternoon, but we've got to shove you on. Well, thank you for the time.
No Q&A?
I don't think we've got time for Q&A unless there's one really good, somebody itching for a question. Well, go on then, go for it.
With making stuff hard,
Mm-hmm.
with the backing of Niantic, do you feel like it's a little bit easier? Is it just chaos?
I mean, I think that, you know, going from 10 years of like small, scrappy, like startup game dev to a company like Niantic is an amazing experience. It feels like you've been driving along in a small family car and somebody goes, "Here is your spaceship." It's incredible. Certainly, I think a crucial difference is being able to think further ahead, being able to kind of look slightly more long range, and you know, like as a startup, this week revenue, you know, this quarter, maybe like this half year, but you're very like near term and typically in terms of what you're thinking about. And obviously, like the ability to look slightly further ahead is a huge advantage, and that's where these lily pads really help, because you're trying to put those together. I think that at the same time as that, of course, I hope that culturally we're still going to keep the kind of intensity that we had as a small team, because there's a great advantage to those imminent deadlines, because they force prioritization and creativity and all those sorts of things. You know, we want to still have that energy as a group, and we're working to maintain it.
And if anybody wants to follow more of your thoughts, what's the best way of doing that?
You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ammonite, AMMONITE. So tweet at me there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Big round of applause, please, for Alex.